Hey, Doug.
Hello, sir. Here.
I can't hear you. Is your microphone on?
Yeah. No audio?
Okay. All right. Sorry. I think it was on my end. Hey, Anna.
Hello, Anna. Bear with me. I'm still materializing.
And you are quite bright.
Yeah. Yeah. I joke with people that I materialize for these things.
And then I got to master Wayne's World sound.
And then I go back to the field.
No, we need to master that 3D holographic projection stuff. Anna, you're muted. Gavin.
Hello, Gavin.
Looks like you're still in Latvia. Is that the familiar cafe you're in?
It is the Latvia Hotel in Central Riga. Yes, it's a Radisson Blue. Yeah, it's a nice little place. Yeah. So, hello, Anna.
Hiya.
I figure we'll give a minute or two for other folks.
That joke that you made about materializing, Doug, I was going to say that is actually happening at every moment, but we are not aware of that.
I agree, but don't tell anybody.
No.
Yeah, when you share that with other people, they tend to call the guys with the white coats and the long sleeves.
I love these conversations. Later on today, one of the people I'm speaking with is a guy called Sperry Andrews from the Human Connection Institute. And
I know Sperry. Yeah.
Do you? Oh, great.
Yeah, I've done his sessions.
Great.
Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
I can't say that I really experienced what I was supposed to experience. Some people did, though that it worked for some people, but it didn't really work for me. I enjoyed it, but I didn't have it was part of the Barbara Marx Hubbard course that I was doing, and he was on the same course, and then he got a few of us to do that on the side.
Okay, cool. That's useful feedback. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Oh, you're going to meet with him today?
Yeah, I'm due to have a call after this one. He's going to join for the first part of the call, and then I'm going to have a bit more of an in-depth conversation with him tomorrow.
Well, that was quite a few years ago that I did that. So, I mean, things could have developed significantly since then. Yeah. I
must admit, I was surprised when I found out what was the year of his birth. I thought, wow, crikey, you're doing all right for your age, So he must be well, in April he's going to be 67. In April.
Oh.
Yeah. So.
Hi, Gertrude.
Hello, Gertrude.
Hey, Gertrude. How are you? Is he a mermaid?
Is who a mermaid?
Sperry Andrews. He's got his cover photo as a mermaid.
Oh. Well, he could be. Who knows? Maybe he materializes
Yeah.
onto land every day.
Yeah.
Okay, we're at 11:05. What do you think? Should we get rolling?
Sure.
Yeah. People join when they join.
Yeah.
So, I'd like to start with a share that a friend in the Enlivening Edge circles created, and I found it really rich. And so I'd like to open with it. So bear with me. We acknowledge the dance of acceptance of what is in the moment and the dreaming of what is to come. Step into a present moment space with us. The purpose is to practice being together with the agreement that each curiosity and whatever might be alive for us in this moment. We agree to each take responsibility for our own experience. When you join us, you also agree to a willingness to be vulnerable, share your story, ask for help when you need it, share wisdom that emerges within you in response to others, be held, be seen, be witnessed, share your struggle, be transparent, accept what is. This is not a place to hide. At the same time, we're all human. Some days we are not our best. We slip up. We do things and say things we regret, etc. So there is an underlying acceptance of all of it, everything, and folding it into moving forward, not letting it stop us. So the question I would open with is, what stops you? What gets in your way? And I invite you to leave that at the door. And I'm going to open the floor.
Thank you, Doug. Was that from George?
No, that was actually from Lori Sortino. She's part of the Enlivening Edge crew. But I just thought it was beautifully inclusive. It sort of hit all the right notes for me.
Yeah, thank you. And if that's written down somewhere and you're okay to share it, then that'd be great. I'd like to read through that. Yeah. Well. Yeah.
I will share that that was exactly the same reaction I had. And I asked her, I said, could you please put that in the chat? And I said, and I promise I will steal it mercilessly and put it into use. And she said, absolutely. So I will do that right now.
Thank you.
Sure.
My response to it is it's a lot to take on board. And what I would probably do is forget about it. Yeah, because it's not something I could hold on to and try and measure my behavior or responses by. It's nice to hear because it sort of maybe puts us all in the right frame of mind. But I've already forgotten about it.
can you say the opening question again?
Sure. The opening question was, what stops you? What gets in your way? And the tagline, although not explicit, is from being present, from being 100% here.
I actually was wondering about presence myself and what it really means to be present. Because I don't really know, and I mean this sincerely. Sometimes part of my focus is on taking notes because I value sharing with those who are not just the people in this group. And sometimes it's also for taking notes for something that I want to come back to in the future. And if I don't write it down, I probably will forget it or not know what point in the conversation it appeared. It is inevitable that at some point, if I'm writing, I'm probably using some part of me to write, and that part of me is probably not listening as well as if I were not to write. And yet there's a value there of trying to service those who are not in this direct conversation. So that's a notion of presence that I'm wondering, you know, is that something that I ought feel, oh, let me say it this way. I'm present to the group and those beyond, including those in the recording and including those in the future. And it's that sense of group that I'm trying to be present with when I actually take these notes. If I were to be present with just the people in this group, just listening to that very word which is being uttered at that very moment and putting my entire person into that word, I probably wouldn't be taking notes. So I'm just sort of sharing that little thought in my mind. It's not really a problem. It's not really a question. It's just a little thought for now. Over. Hey, Tammy.
Morning, everyone. I've literally just opened my eyes. So I'll be faffing about a little bit on and off camera as I do my regular mornings. Sorry about that, but it's so nice to see everyone.
So Sam, that's sort of the challenge, isn't it? The challenge is we only have, I mean, I've endeavored from my George Poor chaotic chat, explorations. I've sort of basically learned how to transcribe and listen at the same time. But ultimately, we really can only do one thing at one time at 100%. So there is this sort of trade-off allocation, dilution or diminution of here and now at the expense of what, at the expense of that for whatever else like intervenes or intercedes. And the intercedes part, the interesting thing for me is that can either be an external, like taking notes. It can also be an internal, like a cognitive dissonance or a belief or a fear or reactivity to something that like literally goes, I'm taking 40% of the core for this right now. I'm gonna distribute my processing capability. And I'm going to slow down on intake on the here and now of new stuff that's coming in because I'm doing that. you know, like that's also like part of what we're here for. And I should probably do it. You know, two-liner on it is human beings have buttons and they're invisible and they're below the surface and they're generally not predictable. And sometimes they're not known by anybody. Sometimes they're known by the person who has them and not by anybody else. And sometimes they're visible out of the box all the time, saying, push me, please. And everybody knows about them and everything in between. And the question is, how can a group of people coming together to do together and to explore together, to exchange and converse and connect, handle a button being pushed in a way that minimizes the negative or adverse or experientially destructive effects of that for the individual whose button is pushed, but also for the collective at large. So, so that instead of a reaction that escalates it, where everybody picks their sides and goes to war, which is sort of the brainstem thing of human beings, to, you know, not to generating the opposite, to really putting a floor under it, containing and pivoting and shifting it, or enabling it to be shifted to learning and to inquiry and understanding. So that's sort of the meme of Sundays. And I think, you know, a button can be emotional. I think a button can also be cognitive, which I hadn't really thought about before, but it's absolutely, you know, like if somebody is, you know, half present or getting half input, then what are the ramifications of that as you go down the road? And the assumption is everybody got everything. And lo and behold, you know, this one got 20%, and that one got 80%, and that one was scratching the cat's, you know, belly and got none. And but the assumption is we're all up to speed. We're on the same page. I'll stop. Anna, you raised your hand.
Yeah.
And what are your buttons?
My buttons? My daughter, because she's me. So I look in the mirror and it drives me out of my mind.
Can I come back?
Sure.
Sorry, Gertrude, I had already raised my hand. What I was hearing was that there was a definition or an assumption about presence being paying attention. You know, it's sort of like, sit up, pay attention. It's that sort of interpretation that I'm hearing as presence. And I think perhaps that's worth looking at because I think it would be interesting. That wouldn't be how I would hear presence. And so I think we're going along with that meaning as though we've assumed that everybody is on that page. And I think it'd be good to sit and look at that.
Could you share more about what in the framing conveyed that energy? I mean, I didn't have that intention, expression of the word, but I'm curious what, you know, what raised it.
Did you want to say something, Sam?
In 5 seconds, for me, the part of it that resonates with what Anna said was the petting the cat inclusion in your thing, because I pet my dog a lot, but in my mind, I'm very much listening. So for 5 seconds, that's my response to, oh, wait, I shouldn't be petting my dog. I should be just right up here, my face in the video, making sure that my eyes are open, etc., etc. That's what conveyed it to me. Over.
But I think it was also in your original contribution, Sam, because you were saying you couldn't take notes and also pay attention to what was being said, or not be fully present. So there's a sort of an assumption that being present, being present and presence, I think, are different things. That's what I'm trying to say.
I actually agree. And thanks, Anna, for pointing that out, because I was making my opening statement, in a sense, to drive that question out. Because let me take 30 more seconds. And that is that if we're all, let's say, a band of 6 people going to Mordor, and we're passing through various villages, and some of us have to stay watch when we're sleeping, and we have to go, some of us have to go make coffee, and some of us have to go, cook. For that 2-week trek, we are very much with each other. I'm not going to use the present word yet. Okay, I'm just going to say we are with each other. Okay, so our attention and focus is necessarily going to take different roles and different intensities and different areas of focus, but we're still very much together, very much in support of what the band, the guild, is doing. In a 5-minute conversation, we don't need to cook, we don't need to gather water, we don't need to hunt, all those sort of things. So it's much easier to just all be really, really attentive and focused, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a notion in which the duration of the encounter focuses us in different ways throughout the event itself. And for me, that's natural, that's human. And everybody can bring themselves to that event as much as possible, because someone could say, geez, I don't see anybody gathering firewood, so let me gather firewood, okay? I don't see anybody else, checking that mountaintop over there, there's something going on, let me check that mountaintop, in service to the group. That's all I'll say for now. Over.
Yeah, Sam and I were talking about that just the day before, about the quality of presence of taking notes. And when Sam was talking about it then, and I was thinking about it, I thought, well, because he's actually taking notes, what is the quality of attention with the physical task, but he's actually transcribing what is happening in the moment. And in that practice of split attention, yet focus specifically on the content, I'm not sure about this percentage piece. Maybe it's being actually hyper focused. But also, even when you're really listening and you have your own thoughts going off, right? This is the tension around what's going on, because so much is going on. And then, so there's a piece that I'm wondering about, just following Anna's line of inquiry here, around if I'm really listening, is it that it's I'm allowing some more openness to be able to widen the pipe to really hear, or is it triggering thoughts in my mind that's actually taking me away from this moment because it's so inspiring, or it's got me going. These are just different pieces that I'm really curious about in terms of how this actually works. And there's some functional pieces around the quality of attention, what happens in our bodies and emotions. And so I think the jury's out in terms of, what we actually know about what our presence is doing and being. And thanks for bringing it up, Anna.
Yeah, hi everybody. And I was so busy with myself and seminars holding that I didn't write it down and tell you that I'm not coming. So for me, there are several layers when I listen to you. One of which is, for me, the difference between attention and presence. That's completely different. And with attention, there is a specific way of looking at presence, like a teacher who wants to have attention from the pupils. I don't say this is the only way, but that comes up to my mind, and that's not what I would like to equal with presence. And in the holacracy field, we have that question: what do you need to say, or what are you occupied with, and what do you need to say to be here now, to be present? So it's up to the individual what needs to be expressed to have the feeling to be present, whatever that might be. And it's meant that the distractions, I come from somewhere else, or I had a fight with somebody or whatever, and I need to say that in order to get my mind clear enough to be here. And I like that question, because it gives me the full responsibility to be whatever I mean in being present, and to say what's necessary. And to go to that question, I'm just editing a master's thesis on chatbots and language assistants. So it's hard to read it and to wrap my mind around. It's a boyfriend of my daughter's, and I was like torn between I need to do that so he can do the final version, and I really wanted to be here. So I let that go and go back to that later. But I need to say that, because this is like in my mind. I should rather do that, I promised. And one more thing is about cats, patting cats. I think actually, just hormone-wise, it's actually giving you more oxytocin, and so more bonding, even with us. So I think it's counterproductive, it's productive for being present. I mean, not feeding the cats and doing the stuff you need to do in order to take care, but this bonding gives oxytocin rise, and thus being with us in a better way. So don't stop that.
Yeah, I love that. I wouldn't describe it using the chemical or the physical or the hormonal, but our connection with the natural environment, which I think with animals, with plants, with the natural environment, helps us to be more connected to ourselves, to our existence. So for me, presence is something like that, like somehow tuning in to our conscious existence, or the consciousness of our existence, or something like that. So it really has, and that somehow, as Tammy was saying, it opens a wider pipe to receive without actually focusing in a concentrated way, pay attention, but it does allow us.
And shared space at the same time. I'm conscious then when I go off camera that my image disappears, and truly you guys don't have the experience of me being present, but I am present. I'm listening. But I'm sending a signal that I'm not visible, and what's the effect and impact on that to the group? And because oftentimes our conversations do go, for 2 to 3 hours, there's bio breaks I need, for example, and those sorts of things. That's just really, kind of human. And I don't necessarily want to share. But yeah, I'm really, really interested in what that is when we're outputting and intaking, and kind of breaking that down and slowing that down and really looking at the expression and the as they're two parts of a multiplicity of things that are going on. And it does cause a little bit of tension. Like, when I hear what someone says, all they can say is what they can say in that moment. And, for example, Anna said, I didn't hear this part. It's partly because Anna has another part that is really important to be seen and heard in that space to kind of build out the tapestry of what we're talking about. And we're kind of making it visible, audible, as a further contribution. I don't know. I'll leave it there, but it's really kind of this many-legged race together.
Anna, I resonate with the sort of recognizing the ineffable, explaining it or grounding it. Like reducing it to the chemical, reducing it to the like biophysical reaction mechanics level. A big part of this for me is, can we unpack that mystery a little bit and bring it to sort of a level of consciousness, awareness, not just understanding, but sensing. And that the question of that, or sort of the catalyst of doing that for me was George Poor's sort of saying, just in the form of conversation, what if you create space? So there's sort of these micro choice moments. There are these micro choices for me, in my experience of it. If I consciously am choosing to sort of, from an attention standpoint, just receive, then I don't think it's that the triggering of my own stuff or threads or what Tammy was referring to goes away. I think it happens. It sort of runs in the background. But I am very aware of making a choice not to have that mechanism consciously on the table. Like, I'll deal with that later, is sort of the vibe. And there's another piece of that ties into when you said the thing that I read at the beginning. It was sort of like you could register it as it happened, but it's not something you held on to. It's not something that had any permanence for you. And purely on a blind faith basis, but my experience orientation toward that type of thing is that even though I may not consciously, quote, be holding on to it, I trust it's registering, like it's going into the data bank. It's like in the same category as, following years of holochain stuff without ever really getting, grip on it, and then having one event that brings it home on a grok basis, and all of that other stuff comes piling back in as a awareness, reference. So I suspect all of these dimensions of being in attention and present and functioning are all running all at the same time. The question to me is, which one am I choosing to, have be 100%, of from a choice place as sort of the explicit first one visible in the cue from a conscious sense feeling awareness place. And I'm not saying that's formed. It's just, sort of mind share and thoughts appreciated.
I would like to hear from Gavin something. And hi, Glenn. It's cold in Norway, isn't it?
Yeah. Good to be inside.
Hello. Thank you. Thank you, Gertrude. Let me just, because my connection's a bit unstable at the moment, but let me just try and put on the video for a short time. Bear with me, and let's do that. There we go. I'm really appreciating the sharing about attention and presence, and the difference, and about Doug mentioning micro choices. And I guess I'd like to just sort of come back to one of the questions at the outset, which was around what do I feel might be sort of blocking me at the moment. And at the moment, I'm spectacularly failing at building a practical bridge in my mind initially between the crazy big stuff that I've been thinking about for a while now, and the sort of the on the ground micro choices, micro tasks, and And if I might just share one very brief kind of crazy thing. So I'd started writing a document rather pompously entitled An Inclusive Planetary Offering, an IPO. After the first few lines about standing on the shoulders of giants, the next paragraph mentioned Star Wars: A New Hope. And a few days later, I had a conversation with a guy in the US who I met through a holochain sort of webinar. And it turns out that he and his colleague were working on a proposal that I believe they're going to present in February, possibly March, to George Lucas. And and I thought, what a strange and marvelous and mysterious kind of universe we live in. So I guess for me, it's just kind of trying to come back to boy, I need to get a whole lot better at sort of channeling my energy and enthusiasm and all the ideas buzzing around my sort of mind, with being, just being grounded, and being able to connect with other human beings on a very human, kind of level. And so the part which is attempting to honor the of so many people, and also honoring what really needs to be done, in the here and now on the ground, and just trying to build bridges and between all these kind of moving parts. So I'll stop there. Thanks.
I just wanted to bring in another small piece that I was thinking about, some of what Gertrude has brought and taught me, which she likes to often start a session with a minute of silence, so that we all kind of get into a shared field together. And that just occurred to me as being one practice that really helps to foster the kind of presence that I think we're aiming for. And as we were in that little moment of silence, while people were making choices of what they were going to feed into next, I just felt into that moment and wanted to just put that piece of what silence is, and chosen silence in a group, and how that serves our collective cognition process.
I like that because it reminds me of how martial arts classes begin and end. Martial arts classes that I've been in begin and end with a meditation.
Should I answer this question, I'm sorry I came a little late. Actually, I've been to a sort of meditation retreat today, so that's why I'm a little bit late. So it's interesting you mentioned that. But was there a question that was brought about what is blocking me at the moment, or what was it? I don't hear anything.
There was a little piece that I read at the top, and the question it ended with was, what stops you or what gets in your way? And the tacit unspoken part is from being present here now.
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm still sort of settling down, so for me it's a little bit sort of settling down. But I just heard what Gavin said, and I could really recognize that there's there's some very big ideas, big bold ideas, and then there's the activity here and now, and to bridge those somehow. That is an ongoing issue. Keeps coming back. But there's also habits simply unconscious habits sort of chatter in the back of the mind, and yeah, it feels as if sometimes I come to this point of almost really experiencing what is happening moment by moment, very much alive, very vivid. And then there's maybe a sortlessness in the back of the mind, a reluctance to totally let go. Actually, I spoke about this today with some of these people, so it's quite interesting. Yeah. It was mentioned that there's a certain point where you kind of have to jump into the deep water without knowing what is there. And then sometimes there's something saying, that's not what's going to happen, and now you're supposed to do this, but that's sort of the habitual mechanical apparatus of memory churning on. But the problem is a lot of it's sort of subconscious in the back of the mind, so it's not often I don't even notice it. Yeah, that's just a few things that come to my mind. So yeah, I'm good for now. How was the sound, by the way?
For me, I can hear you, but it's still muffled, Glenn.
Yeah, when Gavin and Glenn told us about our big thoughts and our big creations and the everyday life, and I was thinking maybe it's a matter of neither being hopeful, like staying here and hope something will, nor being hopeless or resigned, like holding that tension between these creations, and that on a daily basis I have to deal with failures in the face of that. Yeah, maybe it's really the possibility of being with both of them without hope and hopelessness, but just holding that space in which it can unfold. I just thought that because we tend to hope someday it will be better, or go back into resignation, say I can never fulfill on that. And yeah, that was just something that came to my mind. And another thing, Anna, to your physiological hormone thing, I thought you even can prove it or something like that on a physiological basis. It doesn't mean that this is all, but sometimes it's good to have the normal world. So, I mean, I'm a natural scientist, so so it's like sometimes to go back and do those links. For me, it's helpful. For some people, it's okay, that's even on that level, we can prove we can say, okay, something is happening that is helpful, and it doesn't explain everything. So that was my part of saying, even on that level, we can say it's helpful when you pet your dogs. So that I just needed to say that. And a question, does anybody of you know Joseph Jaworski? I had a seminar with him. He is...
I've definitely heard the name.
Pardon?
I definitely heard the name, yes.
Yeah. He's in his 80s. And he was at the source of the REU. David Bohm and was a student when they created it. So this was yeah. So if you want to hear a little bit more, but I was at that, he was invited here to Germany, and we were in a big seminar with 180 people. And it's amazing to have time, testimony of when the things were seedlings. Yeah.
I have something which is sort of on my mind. It's sort of tangentially related to what we've been talking about. I've been watching some of the videos, and what's come up a lot of, or several people have mentioned about being in the flow. And so not wanting to limit themselves to a particular time or topic, but just to allow that flow to happen. It's sort of like a creativity or something. And it struck me that we could make, well, I would say that for me, I prefer conversation, which is going backwards and forwards and sort of sticking to a particular topic, rather than this creative flow that other people enjoy. And I was thinking that we could make a distinction in the same way as has been made about different types of groups. We could make a distinction about the different types of talking that we like to do or that we feel comfortable with. And some people may like both, and they can go to both types, and some people may prefer to. I'm just putting that out. That was something that has occurred to me.
I think that really that speaks to me about this idea that there is sort of awareness, recognition of those differences on sort of a preferences basis, that not everything is for everybody, and figuring out how to relate to or visualize the field, the universe of choices or possibilities, and making that as diverse and broad and rich as possible in service to the idea that the more variety there is, the greater the ability for more people to find what works and speaks to them or pulls them. And, you know, that's sort of a dimension of that human being centered thing, which is rather than aspiring to the general single unitary solution for all, or serving or dish or meal for everybody, it's recognizing that maybe the mission and the goal is to figure out how to enable everybody to find the meal they like, which is almost 180-degree opposite vector. In you know, from sort of conceptual framing of how many ways can people contribute, be generative, participate, and the challenge and the goal and the mission is to enable all of them to. I'm complete.
And I think, as Anna points out, that's behind the what you call the forking of these conversation threads. Is some of them want to take a specific sub-focus, you know, not the more general free-flowing one. I think there has been that recognition, and we're just trying to figure out at what level to be so granular, even within one of these conversations, right? Because as you're pursuing something, if a question is really intently, you know, interesting to me, you know, I really am pursuing that. And I'm really focused on the conversation and really figuring out where that goes in my mind, because I say, well, that really means this, and that really means this, and that really means this, and bing, 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 a light bulb goes off, and I'm really excited. But in the meantime, somebody else has already gone off to topic B, right? But yet, I think I'm very present with that initial inspiration. And it really fired off this chain of, you know, realizations in my mind. And yet, in all of us, there's that valid short-term memory that's still capturing the physical thing of what was said over here, so that even after I register this inspiration, I can still, in my mind, return to that last 7 seconds or 20 seconds or whatever it is and kind of catch up, you know? So there's that going on internally for each of us. And I would say if each of us is inspired so much by something that's said, to really say, wow, that's really important to me. You know, here's all these connections that I finally made in my mind, and I really want to, you know, not lose this. I think one ought to celebrate being able to do that, and then figure out how to catch up, you know, if the conversation has gone on to a different thing. So there's all this stuff going on in each of us. You know, there's another saying that I really like, which is, I want to have an open mind, but not so open that my brain falls out. You know, it's still there. It's still working, you know, and it's still active.
Can you say the phrase again? I didn't acoustically.
Yes. It's that, you know, I want to come with an open mind, but not so open that my brain falls out, you know? So I think we all come to this differently. And what triggers that inspirational moment for me is probably different than what triggers an inspirational moment for, you know, someone else, because we all come with different threads of thought that need to be fed, right? So, you know, maybe an apple that you throw feeds why one particular thought that just really inspires me and makes this whole 3 hours so worth it for me just this one day, right? If nothing else, that's what made it worthwhile for me, you know? And yet there's different things that really spark others. So I think it's really fascinating conversation, because in one sense, we're already showing up with our time and presence and attention and energy. Do we really want to go into each of our minds and brains and really say, well, geez, you know, there's this much here, this much there, this much there. You know, so much of it is on, you know, getting snacks, you know, so I don't go hungry and I don't actually need to go off and fix a pancake or something for myself. So I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because it indicates that some of us are really, really trying to get a lot out of this, but we're still like physically involved in drinking water sometimes, having snacks, petting dogs, etc. But we're still trying to get something out of this. And that's why I kind of was asking that first question about, what does presence really mean? And I'm still in that question. Thanks, over.
Yeah, this is really interesting, I think, because let's say we're here and we're trying to collectively figure out something which can make life better than it's been until now. So then we have to discover something which we've never known before and maybe never seen before. So there isn't any map to follow, there's no method to follow, but there is the subconscious mind, and there is maybe a deeper understanding which has formed over a long time. Sometimes it's seen as a higher intelligence, or you can see a collective intelligence. And in some moments, it's like I can feel to of energy, and suddenly everything seems really clear and really simple and really obvious. And there's certain insights, certain insights that come back at those periods. For example, I'll take one example. There's an idea which comes to me about making circular cards and organizing all my notes with circular cards. And when I'm in a certain state of mind, that is totally obvious that that's the right thing to do. And then it's just a very trivial example, but in some states of mind, that just seems very obvious that you should go much deeper into this and see what you can make out of the cards, because then you can have infinite combinations and you can have layers. And so, but then there's what Sam mentioned. It's like all these things, eating food, drinking water, have to go here, have to fix this. And it's sort of like the normal day-to-day existence is rigged in a way where there's always the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. And there's sort of never any room to really access this other part of the mind. And at the same time, when looking at the global situation, the impression for me is that that is what's most needed. Some of those insights that come from a more collected state, and then once again, there's this bridge between the other world and this world, the world of the mind and the potentials and the practical world, but also the sort of calling which sometimes comes in a more present state. And yeah, I do feel that with these kind of conversations, that there's a possibility for opening a space where we can access different parts of the mind and maybe access some of these insights and try to formulate them in a somewhat coherent way, and try to find a way to enact these insights and bridge the gap between the possible and the actual. Yeah, that seems to be a big part of the work which needs to be done. And because I often feel like there's some part of my mind who just sees the answer at moments, and it's so elegant, it's perfect, it includes everything we've ever talked about in every single conversation, and every single person's ideas and visions are included. It's like this perfect diamond or something, and then you see it for a moment, but then suddenly it's all the other stuff. And then you see it again, and it's all the other stuff. And so I don't know if it's a perfect diamond there, but I suspect that there is. So at least it seems worthwhile testing the hypothesis, if nothing else. And if we're gonna do that, we have to have some interaction between these worlds. And I guess we also have to obviously take a chance and go out on a limb and risk the possibility of saying something totally nonsensical, incoherent. But then, I mean, that can be fun too, and it's a learning process. So, but I very much feel that's a part of what we can do in this space, and I'm very interested in doing it. But I also like having a subject, for example, for one talk, because it's a place to begin. So I don't see this as being opposed to structure, but it's like you can have a playful relationship around structures, and then you can return to the structures. And, yeah, just a few ideas.
I just want to share. I want to share something that's sort of an emergent phenomena of what you just described that I'm experiencing happening already. So there have been these rather robust comment threads occurring, and somebody would raise a question, and I would read the question and have a flood of ideas and responses come into my head. And I go to the next item on the list, and there's Glenn answering and channeling me. Like, you responded with the language in exactly the way, with the level of, drill down, scope, breadth, full, like, it, you took care of it. Like, that was the experience, like, done. I don't have to say anything, done. And the same thing has happened a couple of times with Charlie, in some of the threads where, read it and then, had a bunch of stuff coming and go to the next, and there's Charlie responding point for point, 100% alignment, 100% resonance. And ironically, at one point at the end of one of Charlie's response, he goes, Doug, help me out here, brother. And and all I could do was write back and go, I couldn't do better than Charlie did. Like, it was perfect. Thank you both, done. So, like, I think that level of connection feeling has been created here, exists here between all of us, not just when we're on these sessions, but in the between times too, that there is a field. And part of all of this is in an intangible sensing level that isn't of mind and isn't rational and isn't by force of our intellectual, construct or articulation or framing. Like, there are other planes of substance, value, knowing, wisdom, awareness, connection that exist. Look, ma, no hands. They're there. We're not driving the ship, or controlling them, but they're there. And so I'm seeing that stuff like poke through more and more frequently. And I'm taking it as like, we're on the right track. Like, keep going. We're gonna, we're gonna see it emerge out of the, it sprouts. So I just wanted to share that. Complete.
Hi, Harry.
Hey.
Hi. I missed the first part, but I would like to share something I stumbled upon, I think the day before yesterday. There was a YouTube by Roger Penrose, who is one of the most world famous mathematicians. And he tried to explain, I got the gist of it because he's so smart, that we can do a lot with computations and reasoning and structures and all that, but understanding is something else. You cannot reason into understanding, because reason uses the set of rules already in place in order to get somewhere. But seeing and understanding is kind of beyond that, above that. And I think that's kind of, so this is not a logical thing. It's something else that I see it, the inside. It's like something, the coins dropping, and then all of a sudden there's something opening so that you see. And I've, of course, from my intuition, I've always preferred to be on that level. So I kind of make my living on that if I ever make a living. And but I think that's important to notice that there's things beyond and boxing and all that we are kind of feeling into. Just that I'm complete for the moment.
And I think that's kind of some of the most exciting stuff for me is we're in the mechanics of collective intelligence as we and leaning into that greater thing of understanding through watching the signals, through deeply listening, and through what comes up in the mind and those connections. And when we do it together in this group, I feel like it outpictures something that has been internal for each person. And I'm really excited of what it is to really share this mind, heart, embodied space, which is why presence is so important, because it's greater and deeper than just the mechanical words going by. And yeah, I feel like that outpictured wisdom, that kind of putting it out there together as a tapestry of thought that is inclusive and allows threads to move into the tapestry and out again. I just feel like it's building capacities that are really needed, and maybe this is one of the missing chunks, and that for me I've had a hard time articulating, is how do we actually think together, and what are all of the dimensions of activity that need to happen to support that and to create that context, including love, appreciation, those sort of really soft human pieces that we're up to. And there's just so much going on in any given moment. And yesterday I watched the last half of Thursday's session where Anna stayed on for a little bit. Doug and Harry had to go off to Enlivening Edge, and the four of us had a really amazing process. Like, I watched it last night and then I watched it again, because I was just receiving so much from what was there. And so there's all these dimensions, and what, because Doug and Harry had to hop off, boom, bleep, bleep, they were gone, and then it went to 4, and then Anna had to go, and when she dropped off, it was 3, and so the quality of attention and shift that happened was so amazing, and there was a really powerful transformation that I was able to re-witness, that I thought had happened. But then when I saw it again, I was like, wow, we did do some powerful work there. And much of it was really being conscious about the quality of our attention together as an appreciative space where, Sam could share, his some of his work around the community of impact. And that moment, there was a moment there, or a series of moments of transformation in having that space held, and Sam being able to share from this really beautiful place that answered the challenge that we had been experiencing in the session earlier. And so it was about, in part, quality of attention, and like allowing there to be space for Sam to have a need of his met that was kind of gumming up the works in a way. And so there's a lot of human stuff that's just around that as well. But I just wanted to share some of those pieces, and with that, I'm complete.
Yeah, I want to add another aspect. What we seem to be navigating is what some call the complexity domain. It's too complicated, too multidimensional to grasp in any other way. And the people who are totally into the complexity say what you need, the way to tackle that is you cannot predict anything, so you have to sense and respond, and then find a way to see structures or patterns emerge from that. But you don't know anything. It's like you're in the sea and you just have to go sailing and see wherever you end. Over.
I think this comes, oh, sorry. I think this comes back to where we started with this presence. What we were sensing about presence was something to do with sort of like being in the zone, or being intuitively connected to oneself, so that we're more open to what is happening, not in a way that we need to define it or explain it, but just in a very direct, immediate way. I mean, what we're talking about is life, actually. It's talking about being alive. That's what we do all the time. I mean, that is how we live most of the time. We seem to be just trying to understand what are the mechanics of something which just happens really naturally most of the time. And it does get contaminated by all our ideas about how we should be doing, which is, Doug, why I sort of reacted. You read out that thing, and I didn't want to sort of rubbish it, because it wasn't rubbish. But in another way, I find, as I've said before, about ideals, when we just list all the ideals that we are sort of aiming for, it feels like a bit prescriptive. And so there was me shaking it off and saying, yeah, that's fine, but, I'm going to forget it. And it was a bit challenging, what I was, the way that I was doing it, was sort of teasing a bit. Okay, I'm complete.
My pokiness is rubbing off.
Pardon?
I have this stating term that I use.
Rubbing off. Yes, I got that.
I was just responding to Gertrude. I just said part of my pokiness is rubbing off.
Cokiness? I don't know the word.
He likes to poke.
Poking.
Pokiness.
There's an earlier reference in one of the earlier conversations about poking the bear.
Okay.
And so I'm just saying, occasionally I like to just, poke. Sometimes it's not the bear. Sometimes it's, just us. We are the bear.
Do you want to do it right now?
I've actually been experimenting because I've been mostly listening and not speaking, just taking notes. But I will very much agree with Anna that when Doug read that initial thing, I thought, wow, this is beautiful. And yet it still does feel prescriptive. There feels like there's a should somewhere in there. Now, to me, it also is possible that we, after much conversations, will have a thread, a subgroup, that may eventually adopt what Doug was reading and say, this is the way we want to be in that group. And I think there is a path from here to some of us actually doing that. But in the moment, it felt like, as Anna said, it was quite long, and so it was hard to follow every point of it. And yet there was an implied, yes, I'm going to sign up to this, so I will actually behave this way. And that's the should or the ought that was kind of underlying all of that. And Doug, I know that that was not your intent. You were offering it as an offering of love, as a way to hold a space for conversation. And in a very similar way, I would love to come to these conversations and just, push in, my 6 or so different projects and say, this is all the stuff we ought to be doing. But if I did that all in one move, it would feel very prescriptive and very dead in some parlance here. And not enough interaction would have been possible to really embrace all of that. Whereas I do believe that over time, embrace of each of those lines that you were reading is quite possible and even probable in my mind, But there's just a timing, an evolution, a migration of each of us towards those practices or ideals or values that doesn't happen immediately in the 20 milliseconds or 5 seconds that it takes to just utter that thing. Okay, probably enough. Over.
I have different threads again. One of which I want to reply to what just said. I think there is a difference between creating or maybe recreating it or imposing it on a group, or like even offering it as so we should be like that. And if there is a creation and something like it's who we are, and that's the expression of who we are, then it's different. And not a matter we have to be that like that. And then what Tammy said there, I love that expression, visceral listening and visceral understanding, that Ellie Drake created. It was like in our coaching training, we talked a lot about active listening and what listening is. So hours and hours and pages and pages. And then I heard that one webinar by Ellie Drake, where she said she's Iranian by heritage, and she came to the US not understanding English enough, and so she had to listen with all her body, with everything. So she called it visceral listening. And she said, sometimes I really understood better than later when I understood the language and I was focused on the language. So I really loved that. And immediately when she talked about that, it was like, yes, that's it. That's what I want to be as a coach, a visceral listener. And then there, in another environment, we talk not about understanding, which is more like an intellectual thing of grasping things, but to getting it. There's like, there is a moment in time where you get it, even if you couldn't explain what you just got. But it's like, yeah, that's it. That's what I mean. Or now it's clear or whatever. But you couldn't find the words or the concept or whatever that might be. So that's over.
So just 5 seconds. I did post something yesterday about listening and grokking that I was pretty fascinated to do a little bit of interaction, because I was thinking about this question about presence and what it really means to understand, or what it means to really be in a conversation or even in a group. And that's why I was thinking through, okay, at what level am I being present? And I was listing them for myself. And by no means is it intended to be complete, but they're definitely a spectrum of how plugged in you are. And it went back to this term that came out of this book, Stranger in a Strange Land. I hope some of you have read it. Actually, could I possibly ask, how many of us, by a show of hands, have actually read Stranger in a Strange Land? Ah, cool, 3 of us. Maybe Tammy, but I don't see her. Yeah, but that was where this Martian term, grok, was first introduced, with all of these, implications of how connected we can be and how loving we can be and how much we understand. So that's what was kind of behind my listing of the various different qualitative levels. And so I appreciate those of you who interacted with that, but this thing has been on my mind for several days. Over.
Is it a sci-fi book?
It is science fiction, yes. 20 seconds on it. Basically, a mission is sent to Mars. The adults create a baby, but then the adults die, so the baby is raised by Martians. And the Martians have a much different wisdom than we humans do. And so they introduce, all this ancient wisdom to this fellow who 20 or 30 years later is rescued by another mission to Mars and brought back to Earth. So then it's his encounter with his different practices and traditions and values and how he encounters Earth, and seen in the eyes of this Martian human. It's one of the most classic science fiction novels out there. And even Robert Heinlein, who's one of the best science fiction writers, in my opinion, that's one of his exemplary books. Sorry, exemplary is the wrong word. Most insightful, most interesting books. Most famous as well. Over.
Robert who?
Heinlein.
Heinlein. H-E-I-N-L-E-I-N. Stranger in a Strange Land.
Put it in the chat, Sam.
Okay, I'll put it in there. Thank you.
Just one little thing came to me now, and that is since you mentioned, Tammy, that there this transformation at the end of Thursday, which I also felt when Sam talked about the community of impact, and I felt it was very enjoyable to listen to it. Somehow, since he was talking about what was most important at that moment, there was something it was very vivid. And what I hear in some of the things we're talking about here is a variation of this theme, which has come up several times, and that is each of us have our various ideas about what should be done, or what is possible, or what could be interesting. And then there's a wish to share this to the collective, and at the same time there's a reluctance because it is so much and it's difficult to know, and one's afraid that it will be too much, or it will be a sort of it will be taken as trying to push something that's so this really seems to be something that is blocking me, at least, and maybe many people in processes like this. Of course, there's also simply time and space. It's limited, and so it's a version of that as well. But that is very interesting. So what's been on my mind the last few days is actually this idea of deep diving conversations, and whether maybe that is the missing piece of the puzzle at this point in the process. But I mean, it's like, I feel it's like maybe the most important missing piece in a puzzle, which already has almost all the pieces in place, very many of them well in place, I feel. So it's already very generative, but this, how overcome this obstacle of, if we have each of us have all of these ideas that somehow are all very connected, and it's difficult to just take one bit at a time, but it's also difficult to take the whole thing. And how do we create the space for that? If we could create a space for that which really worked, I think that would be an enormous success. That would be really wonderful. So I just wanted to throw that question out. Yeah.
I thought that the barn raising was the deep dive place where people would present their ideas. Was I wrong about that?
No, not exactly, but this idea was to have a deep dive looking at one person's work at a time in one session, and then the others can ask various questions, but to sort of have that focus. That was one idea which was suggested, which I like very much.
Well, yeah, that's what I thought the barn raising was going to be, that each person would take a session, and then eventually the barn would be raised because everybody would have contributed their piece, which was necessary in order to raise the barn.
So Anna, I can see how that is part of it. I think that the Tuesday conversation was initially proposed to sort of bring everybody and their past works and see how we could actually co-create something together. And I think we're beginning to figure out how to do that. But I think there's been yet another format, which I think Tammy has proposed, which is, let's just take two people and let's get those two people's works discussed, and then really kind of explore that possible collaboration or complementation between those two with a small number of witnesses. So I think that is yet another way of doing a barn raising, with maybe, let's say, a window at a time, or a furnace at a time, or a fireplace at a time. So I think both are attempting to try and create these things out of all these constructs that we're bringing together. That's in my opinion, my understanding. Okay.
Yeah, that was also my impression. That was sort of the difference. one or two people. Yeah.
May I ask for clarification? So that's distinct in the Tuesday group. I haven't been to the Tuesday. It's just I need to watch what I can attend. And so you say in the Tuesday group you talk about each other's works to the others in the way not yet distinguished, but. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that was when, you know, Doug and Heiner and I and Tammy and, you know, Glenn and others said, hey, you know, we've all been spending so many years with each of us coming towards this from a different direction, you know, with different, you know, written works, with different designs, with different guiding principles. And that Tuesday was formed to try and do this mashup. And we're still in the, like, the early phase. We're like in the universe at, you know, the first picosecond or something like that, you know. We're still not yet in the explosion part of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, it could be that I have to switch Thursdays to Tuesdays because there's a seminar coming up and we only could find the Tuesday evening. So.
I just wanted to make a quick suggestion on that point. Because many of us have, or probably all, you know, have obviously several threads to you know, to the work that we're all doing, and I'm just wondering, you know, sort of how many of us, just in terms of the way that you do your kind of weaving, if you like, how many of us sort of represent that those connections visually, like through some kind of map. Because I briefly exchanged a couple of messages with Doug and Sam about you know, some of these sort of smaller breakout sessions, if you like, whether depending on whether there's some people that actually are sort of just, you know, there's like synergetic cross mapping, you know, just kind of just going through a sort of visual representation and go, right, because, you know, obviously it takes a lot longer to try and go through each piece of the puzzle, if you like, the tapestry. Whereas if there's sort of, you know, at least some, even if it's obviously very simplified representation, yeah, it can be really helpful to go, right, and you know, people's energy will go to certain parts of it and go, okay, right, I'd like to, you know, dive deeper on that bit because that fit, you know. Anyway, so that's just my little 2 cents.
That's interesting, Gavin. While you were saying that, I had apparently similar ideas, because while we were talking, I was looking at this. I'll share my screen for a second. A word cloud, share screen. I know that Glenn has already transcribed quite a bit of what we have shared, and from a certain topic or text, you can make a word cloud, so you have a visual idea of what's the most, what jumps out of it. So that's now, because I'm thinking about how on earth can we absorb all this knowledge we have in us. We all carry whole libraries in our in the universes in our heads. So just wanted to share that and throw it into the conversation to make it even more complicated.
I could give one very simple example. I'll go after Gertrude.
No, go ahead. I can wait.
You sure? It's just literally, you know, sort of 20 seconds. I could just. This is a very, very kind of simplified mind map, if you will. So I'll just quickly share. So can you see the screen? Yeah. Obviously, it's not the time now to go into any sort of detail, but I used it just to. It's literally very, very simple map on mind42.com. It's just very, very simple. But the point being is there's a sort of a central coherence holder in this particular map, which I'm calling One Wealth Trust. And then there's a bunch of stuff that comes sort of off the back of that in terms of you know, the Infinite Game and Wealth Studios and, you know, a bunch of other stuff. And then Genius OS is an important part of that in terms of the sort of full life stack. And then sort of at the bottom here, we've got a sort of DNA piece, which is around this sort of unity awareness experience design. But anyway, I'll stop sharing now. But that's just a really very rough and ready, you know, sort of example. And I guess my reason for doing that is because there's so much stuff like this with you guys, with all of you. There's lots of stuff going, you know, through our minds, and I just wanted to try and get it down into some kind of map. Even though, you know, that will change, it will continue to evolve as it should. But yeah, so thanks for letting me share that.
I'm just thinking of Ben Ryan, who created out of unity and diversity. He created, I think, Kumu or something like that, a map actually pretty similar to what we are just talking about, from the people that were in the unity and diversity conversation at that time. So it kind of faded away for me writing the book and things like that. But to reconnect with him and have that, maybe I find it and I can share the link, and to expand it, because it's already in the make, or it was, and there were already several people in there and several organizations, and so he needs to. I'm very just roughly can point to it, but he was very knowledgeable about how to do that, and so he trained himself. Pardon?
I think there was just a tiny bit of feedback.
Mm-hmm. So I definitely have to go back to him and invite him to have him included in the conversation, because that started, when was it, 2 years ago? Yeah, in January, 2 years ago. And yeah, does anybody know that? I think Kumu is the name. Yeah,
It's a very early, very beta version of an idea sharing. I want to acknowledge that I was jumping up and down when Gavin was speaking, because mapping ideas is one of the things that I do, and I don't do it here. I don't impose it here because, you know, I think it would detract from the conversation. But how I think is visual. So I like to connect ideas and, you know, remember, you know, that some things happen together at the same time. So I'm going to just take a few seconds and just let you glimpse one of the ways that I do this. And this is what happened here. Oops, sorry. Let me get back to this particular image. Can any of you see this?
Yeah.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So if you take yourself out of gallery view, you'll probably see this. But I don't want to spend much time on it, but this represents the project that I'm calling Time Browser, you know, where we have the raw record going down here on the bottom in the green, and then we have artifacts that we create out of the raw record, and the raw record can include audio and video and image and annotations, and then we can create more abstracted things like outlines and tags and emotion detection and sentiment and topics. And then out of that, there's an upper blue box where we could actually create blogs or papers or books or even movies, et cetera, et cetera. So this notion of a time browser that allows us to connect back to what actually happened in one of these conversations is one of the ways that I sort of think, and one of the ways I like to connect ideas. And I'm doing this with conversations that we have. Not fast, but I'm doing this, so I'm connecting CMM with Heiner's ideas, with my ideas, with Doug Engelbart's ideas, with Harry's art, with Glenn's ideas. And I'm doing this offline because we as a group haven't gotten yet to an agreement that we want to do this and we want to, spend time doing this. But for me, this is one way of actual understanding, is that post-processing of connecting these ideas and really grouping them and say, what ideas go with other ideas, and what does this now generate? And aesthetically, how do I best lay it out so I can communicate it to someone? So anyway, I'm just running off at the mouth now because I'm so excited, because we now are connecting what Gavin said with what I really see as a way for me, at least, to move forward on some of the things, with the Tuesday barn raising, etc. And that's just giving you a glimpse of the way I'm sort of spending my time and doing some of those connections afterwards. There are maps, and this is, by the way, not the only kind of maps. I do the outlines and the mind maps, that Gavin was talking about. There's others. There's, definitely the full outlines. There's design specifications, my mock-ups. Anyway, let me just stop there. But this is what's inside me that propels me, that motivates me to make sure that, the Tuesdays in my mind are driving towards something like this. Out of one set of possibilities, there's others, clearly. Over.
This closely relates to the work I do, Sam. Today I played with Plectica. Does anybody knows that one?
Yeah, it was introduced last session, I remember. Yes, I took a look at it as well.
No, I'll just share my screen once more for for a minute or so. Let me just see. Then we know what we're talking about. What chat, record, share screen, where are you? Dig. This one. Can you guys see this one? Screen as huge as I can do it.
Yes.
So this is, you can zoom in and out of all kinds of points, but you get of all kinds of, this is about what we do. For myself, I'm just thinking out loud to myself here on this canvas. Because we want to have global collaboration, so we won't form groups, but groups form power imbalances and power corrupts. That's basically the story. This is the kind of threat I'm looking at this point. So this is something we need to solve in order to advance. But because once you're a group and once you're you're winning the game, so to speak, then you arrive in the comfort zone where you don't need to take care of anybody else anymore, because you don't feel anything anymore. So this is a short one, and I did another one just a little more elaborate. I just started playing with it, and you can zoom in and out. So it starts from a visual I made like 5 years ago, this one, and all those thoughts I collected once. These were insights gathered and kind of trying to lay them out and explain them in a map, so to speak. So that's and the nice thing is that it's very new that you can put images in this canvas, and the founder of this software reached out to me to have a conversation about this, so this might be interesting. And it closely relates to my work. I can show stuff of my own stuff as well, so, and some other point. With that, I'm complete for the moment.
I'm relating this to the question that Doug put right at the beginning of what is it that stops us, something or other, can't remember what it was, and please leave it at the door. And I know that all this has to happen because everybody is talking about this all the time. We've just got to show the work that we've been doing for years past, and everybody is just highly motivated to see whether there's any link between. But to me, it comes across still as people in their silos doing, very enthusiastic about what they're doing, and maybe one or two connect up, but obviously it needs to happen, but does it need to happen in this session? I guess that's what I was asking. Somehow, yeah, I mean, it just feels like whatever we start on, this is how we end up, with people wanting, so bursting to show the work that they've been doing. And this, for me, it's something disappointing. I have to say that that's what I'm feeling, because the image that I have of what needs to happen is sort of like building a fire in the middle that we each put a log on, and somehow then this warmth suffuses, and that's how we, you know, that is the collective intelligence, you could say, of all of this. And at the moment, that personally, I don't feel that that is where it's going. And maybe it's just because, you know, people are not familiar enough with each other's work to be able to see the links, or I'm finished.
I just have a little comment to that, because I also noticed that, as you say, Anna, that this has sort of come up again and again. So could that be a sign that this is one of those emergent things, and that maybe what is for, at least for me, is to have some special sessions for this, where we really can have all the visuals and show them, and that will relieve some of that pressure, because for me at least, I really could see a kind of session where it's possible to go deep into the work of one particular person, something they are really passionate about, and go into it in such a way that the person themselves understand their own work better and train their ability to express it, and they're getting questions and feedback. So it will be very valuable for that person to understand their own work and learn to express it. And it will be very interesting for the rest of the group to really try to study one approach which is internally coherent, because there's a sort of internal coherence in the ideas of one person. And that's why maybe it's a little bit difficult if you have one bit here, one bit there, even though that can be very fruitful too, collectively. But at some point, we will have to present something which is coherent, internally coherent, and that feels like that's a part of the learning process. I feel that this is what I miss the most in the media today, is really this chance to see things where we can really learn deeply about the work of one person, something they're really passionate about, and in a way where they learn more during that process. Maybe it could happen many times. So the whole thing grows and expands. And then there's the other more free-flowing conversations where it's more even. And that's that's great too. So, but I feel there is a place for these deep dives, which I feel is very emergent with everything we're doing here.
I think that doesn't exclude each other. Maybe starting with learning from each other in a way Glenn described right now, and then going on another level, and maybe 2 people, maybe more, I don't know, but to then ponder on what has been said, and maybe even expand or learn more in that conversation. Because at the beginning it's a closed, in itself coherent thing, but for me, I always love to learn more than I already know, so I can share what I already know, but through the conversation with you, this will expand as well. So I think both, maybe starting with one person at a time and really like taking Doug's work and really diving deep into that. And then many thoughts come up because it might resonate with some parts of my work or Sam's work or Anna's work. And then we go into a deeper conversation after getting more of what the others talk about.
I want to go back to what Anna said because I'm hearing it a little differently. This is actually the perfect place for what happened to happen, because this conversation is about sort of the blocks and the discontinuities, right? And how do we deal with those? And so this is a really big piece of the puzzle, right? In the context of a group or a collective. And the imperative, the fact that the imperative was 3 people deep in terms of Sam showing something, Gavin showing something, and Harry showing something, and those emergences, which come from individual and sort of mini collective drive to like get to meat and potatoes. And I think also, I suspect there's also a gender thing in that a little bit. There's like a little bit of a male thing about that in terms of wanting to get to tangible and get to concrete, non-abstract. But the truth of the matter is, even in the context of this session, right? How do you frame and how do you express or arrive at or co-develop a way of setting boundaries or of defining boundaries of what's the it here, right? Like what's the focus of us here now, right? And on one hand, there's a need to be able to fork. There's a need to be able to say, this is barn raising, and this is blocks, and this is coffee table conversation, and this is this, and this is that, right? I think that helps. And you actually, I think earlier in this session said something to that effect, which is you sort of like to know that you're in a particular frame. And how in real time experientially do we deal with or respond to mix and match, or a diffusion of the boundaries, or a diffusion of the focus or of the subject, right? Because on one hand, I'm with them. I got a whole bunch of stuff to do show and tell with. Like, I want to get into the weeds. I got all that going on too. But I'm also like not there here. Like not in that headspace here, in the context of grappling and in the context of wrestling with how we do us and what do we do. And if you as one experience the pop-up of a screen share as a real disruption or imposition or intrusion, right? That's counterproductive. Like like not in service to whatever it is we're co-creating or emerging or evolving. And so how do we know that? Or how do we respond to that? So I heard you expressing that. And I'd be curious whether I got it right, first of all. And then second of all, could you go a little deeper, share a little more about what that experientially did to you? Like, what's that about for you?
Yeah, you got it right. Oh, Tammy, you want to say something?
Oh, just that Gertrude has to leave. Is
Yeah,
what I was reading.
sorry, I need to go. Bye.
Thanks, Gertrude.
Okay. I also have to go in about 10 minutes. Yeah. So thank you, Doug. It was difficult to bring that up because it felt sort of disruptive to the way things were going. And especially Sam shaking his head, it really felt like, oh, you know, climb down. But actually you picking that up is helpful to me. I feel there is that what we're doing here has an important place, and it's to do with how we relate to each other. And I have said before, like you said about the male-female thing, that getting into the diagrams and the headspace is a way of disconnecting or not being open to or shutting out or, you know, avoiding in some way how we relate to each other, which is, you know, usually more sticky and you know, not such exciting stuff to deal with. It's more wading through mud and stuff. So yeah, and so what I expressed was disappointment that we couldn't stay on that level, and that because for me, obviously, you know, that's the bit that I relate to, and that's the bit that I want to work with and contribute in. It's the bit that's really real for me. And I know that it is important as well. So I'm not saying, okay, you do your thing and I'll just go off and do mine somewhere else. But yeah, I think it's true. You know, we have to somehow become aware of when we're somehow sliding away from what we're here for.
Anna, could you do a little more of what you are here for, please?
Could you ask me questions? Would that be possible?
This was a question.
Yeah, that was, but it was very general. I don't know where to begin.
I know Sam had his hand up, but I just wanted to contribute one piece here, which is around the map and the territory, right? So the maps, I think, are important, but what I'm hearing is that that gets in the way for Anna of the direct experience of what it is to interrelate as human beings in real time, breathing in and out in our bodies. And so what I heard from Anna was that the diagrams move outside of presence for her, and she doesn't have a resonant field with that. That's just part of how we are different, and I feel that all of it is important. And so there's this space of when Anna says that doesn't resonate for me, does that also feel to the others that they're being shut down for their offering? So these are some human tensions, right? Go for it.
This is, I think, sense and respond. We have stuff that, well, let me just talk for myself. I'm in touch with everything I hear, and then I respond. But in order to give it back, I need to represent it in some way. I can do my body language, start talking, and also show a picture. To me, it's all the same. I'm just kind of exploring what is most helpful, not just for us in this conversation, but also what we want to bring into the to the greater audience. Because I'm not just doing that for myself, because as we want to have a global collaboration, so not just our intimate group here. And yes, we are exploring stuff, but I have a deep need to grasp this in a way that is communicated fast, easily, etc., etc., etc. Faster and better, simply said. And then that's what my focus is for this moment. So, but I just entertain halfway the conversation, I know, but this comes from a deep place within me. And then I can relate to you, Anna, when you say, okay, this doesn't talk to me as much as the direct stuff, but we also need the indirect stuff, like representation instead of presentations and presencing. These are next steps to me, but it's all the same focus for me. Does that help?
Yeah. I wonder whether it might be helpful for you to begin to make a distinction between some things which are more connected to direct interactions with people and this presentation of your work, which is necessary and which comes from a very deep place for you. I appreciate that. What I'm saying is it's not just that I don't read it or that it doesn't appeal to me. I think there is a definite difference in that language of the diagrams and the presentation and the ideas that you've had. And there's a distinction between that and what we're doing now, which is really direct talking to each other or interacting in a way, trying to be sensitive to each other's deep feelings, which are involved here. I appreciate that question that you asked. What am I doing here? And I think that's come up for you before also. I remember that question before. I do feel yeah, you know, and it's really easy to cut the ground from under me and say, you know, you're really not necessary here.
Did I make that impression?
It's a possibility. It's one version of what are you doing here? I'm not, you know, I feel that I have to really be strong and say, sorry?
Okay, I thank you for reminding me. Yes, I asked you, but sorry, I'm a guy. I can't help that. And when I ask a question, you can assume it's the most direct meaning that I try to convey. I just asked the question, and I still am very interested in what you bring. Of course, I sense it, but you're talking about direct experience, direct talking. So that's what I would love to have from you.
Yeah, I wasn't accusing you of saying that. I'm just saying that occurs to me as one possibility. Yes, and that makes me feel I really have to stand strong and feel, yeah, there is something here that I can contribute, which is important. And stuff that I've been working on for years. And
it's so welcome.
Sorry?
It is so welcome.
Oh, good.
It's you know, part of the reason I wanted to make sure to honor what you shared is because the domain you're operating in, the place you sense and experience from, is really sort of the purely human and purely emotional, purely experiential, here, now, me. And that's the part that humans doing aren't given time, space, and the culture doesn't even acknowledge or recognize exists, much less requires priority, attention, respect, acknowledgement, or anything else. And when you stand up and you go, I'm not feeling good, and everybody goes, well, you should be, and if you don't like it, get out. No, that's the truth of it. And I think sort of an element of that is also that that stuff falls more centrally in the feminine. So it's a double whammy because it's been a patriarchy. So, you know, let's not just bury it or ignore it or discount it, but let's actually, you know, run it over with a steamroller. like kill it dead so it doesn't rear its head again. It's a really big thing. So, and to me, for me, these Sundays are all about that nexus. Like, this is exactly what we're here for. And making it explicit and bringing it up and making it a conscious and awareness and a 360-degree full portion of human being. Like, what does that mean? How do we do us? So I'm complete. I just wanted to pile on.
Me too. Anna, I so much as a man desire for this female quality to become present here now in this conversation, but also everywhere. We need that so much, and it's been neglected and ignored and not given to me either. It's not that I was against it, but it just wasn't there for me as a guy either. So we need this. Yeah, we need this, and you're bringing it. So please don't hold back.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to also just touch base on belonging, right? And what that is, you know, because the patriarchy has been so overarching and it's embedded in how we think and are in the world, what's been missing is this receiving fullness of the human experience and so we're needing to kind of grow that again. And so, you know, I think it's really important to notice when there's language around belonging, or, you know, when someone feels, oh, this might not be for me, I think it's important for us to look at that and understand how important it is to what we're doing to that everyone belongs. And, you know, what are those ways that we can show that and demonstrate that, and point out where we need to grow too, because it's not done yet. It's a work in progress as we shed light and learn to articulate how these systems need to change to really hold our embodied fullness. And I really think that that's what I'm trying to understand. And there's a will in this group and others around, you know, how we actually do that. Growing pains. And like, what do I need to let go of to be able to have enough space to take in something else and another, you know, other ways of understanding and being.
Thank you so much, everyone. I have to leave, and yeah,
Anna,
really appreciate.
before you leave, I have to say, because I don't want to say it with you not here, okay, is that clearly I have parts of me that dissent on this particular theme, not because I don't agree with it, but because I think that the overall emphasis of some other elements has been lost. You know, Gavin was trying to give a glimpse. We were not actually going into a technical discussion when Gavin showed his work, or I showed my work, or Harry showed his work. We were just giving glimpses of what is possible. And those glimpses seem to have a very strong effect on you, which is why you came back to that, okay? So in a 3-hour or 2.5-hour conversation, if we spend, let's say, what was it, 3 seconds of someone and 5 seconds of me and 3 seconds of someone else to say this is what is possible, and then to sort of say that didn't land well and that was not something that was going to be resonant.
This is a tangent we don't need at this point, I think. Well, let's go.
Sam,
No, wait. This is exactly the tension. This is for why we are here, is because I feel blocked. I definitely feel blocked. And I want to express that. I would not be authentic if I want to express that I felt blocked.
No, I'm really pleased that you're expressing that, because I could see it there, and it really needs to be expressed. And, you know, we went off and we came back, and it's all part of what needs to happen.
Exactly.
And I'm sorry that I can't stay with you, really keep going on this, but yeah, I leave you in good hands. Okay.
Later, Anna.
Thank you, Anna.
Bye.
No, Harry,
I'm happy to
respond to you also. I think this avoidance of tension is a discomfort and an avoidance of discomfort that I think is precisely what I thought these Sundays were about. You know, is that we understand these tensions and try to work through these tensions. Because these tensions are blocking us from taking steps. Over.
Yes. Yes. You're pointing to a tension I seem to be avoiding. Where did I do that?
Referring to your statement, I think there's something like, this is a tension we don't need to have, or something like that.
No, okay. No, okay. Yeah, well, okay, now, what I would like to say, we might, as a suggestion, we could decide not to ask for permission, but ask for forgiveness afterwards. It's far more practical. That was another one. I just dropped off. But just experiment and make mistakes. That's a very experiential way of learning. I love that. And I operate from a place that I trust you guys until you prove otherwise. Would that work for you as well? And if there's a tension, bring it on, because I love that. I love what's happening here right now. I just don't have any need to avoid that. Quite contrarily.
I just I had a little question. I wanted to ask Anna this, but I think it's good to ask you also because what I heard was a sort of worry of this embodied natural conversation sort of going off into some intellectual mind space where many conversations have gone before, whether it's because of the patriarchy or whatever. And that is, yeah, I totally sympathize with it, of course, because this presence is possibly the most important thing of it all in this process. But the question that I wanted to ask was if Anna could maybe imagine a process where, or if you can imagine a process where we can keep this presence and keep this natural humanness, and where we can include into that the showing of a diagram or a drawing in the appropriate manner, not to sort of, without it taking a dive into a mind space where we never get out of it. We come back, but how that can be included in the natural conversation, because one thing which seems very clear is that this opportunity of speaking like we do now, assisted by visual representations, this is something we could never do before. It was actually never possible to do it before. So it's quite natural that it may appear for us a little weird to sort of mix these things. But that's maybe my challenge is, are we focusing on how we have misused these tools in the past more than how we could use them in the present and in the future? Since these visual representations do seem to me to simplify a great deal and can be very helpful. So yeah, could we imagine a process where this is balanced in a sense of, or relatively balanced? It doesn't have to be perfect. It's just like you say, Harry, you know, but sort of where it becomes fruitful. That's just a question that came to me when I heard it.
For me, this is about, the focus for me is more about the learning on a human being experiential level and how we do us. There's no judgment, there's no right or wrong in any of this. There's no right or wrong in doing a screen share. There's no right or wrong in Anna experiencing an emotional disconnect with that act. But there's a learning in the fact that that can happen. There's no right or wrong in asking the question, why are you here? But there's a learning in, oh my God, yeah, I could see how somebody could take that as, what the fuck are you doing here? Right? And neither of them are right or wrong. It's not about judgment. And it's not about, and you know, piling onto that, we tend to meld the thing with identity, right? So if my sharing, if I internally, my dialogue in response to incoming is, my sharing my screen was wrong, Peck's bad move. And so if that's wrong, I'm wrong. Fuck you. Like, that's sort of the emotional gestalt, right? And
How did you beyond that?
And it's not about that. The truth of the matter is, right? Sharing a screen isn't wrong. And the act of sharing a screen or not sharing a screen has absolutely nothing to do with the human being who shared the screen in terms of modifying love, respect, caring, and connection on a human being to human being level, right? This is about recognizing and surfacing and making explicit the chemistry and the mechanics of how these things happen, when they happen, and what's operating, what are the moving parts, and how do we learn in that, right? And the truth of it, it may just be a belief for cognitive bias that I bring to it also, which is that the Anna part, which is that human sensing, feeling, being, presence part, it is at such a disadvantage 99.9% of the time out there in the way the world currently works. It just isn't even like, who cares? That has nothing to do with us doing, right? Which is the paradigm. So part of, for me, part of these conversations is getting back to balance and consciousness and awareness, where we give that its full portion in the mix on a consciousness level, awareness level, understanding level, intentionality level, right? That just like, because I as a contributor want to be maximally valuable in my contribution, right? And that's that unconditional piece of the unconditional love equation, which is, am I serving everybody, or am I starting to serve this but not serve that? And if I'm doing that, then I may be creating value for Harry in the share of my CMM graphic, but I may be adversely or negatively or disconnectedly destroying value for Anna. So you know what? Zero-sum game, I'd much rather not have my creation or generation of value over here be at the expense of value for somebody else. I'd rather figure an and solution out, right? So the sole purpose in terms of where, in my heart of heart, minds and minds, what this is about is the learning in it, is the surfacing it and developing a more profound and comprehensive understanding, awareness, appreciation, and the power of our words, the power of everything we do, because it's big. It's really big. And I'm complete.
%. But let's take also a co-evolutionary theme to this, where those of us who are viewed as being in headspace need to grow into being in heart space as well, or you can name all the other 7 or 8 chakras as well. But it could be also the case that some of us who are spending a lot of time in heart space need to also think about bringing in the other contributors who are spending time in headspace. So we're each learning, right? So those of us who may not have been comfortable in the past, and I'm not naming names, I'm not even naming myself, okay? Who are not comfortable with being solely in heart space, have to get there, have to reach there, have to say, hey, there's value there, and I want to grow myself to go and be more in heart space. And I'm suggesting that there's a way for those of us who are naturally inclined to be in heart space to also accept the other chakras, to also accept the mind, which is also part of us. And that's how we become whole. So we each need to think about coevolution along all of these different human centers. You know, existence, gut, sensuality, speaking, voice, heart, intellect. Those are all important. And I want us to see, or at least I personally want to see us growing towards embrace of all of that. And I think it's possibly also possible to misconstrue that those of us who have been here for 4 or 5 months don't yet have that appreciation of heart space. I think those of us that are here do. And I think it's possibly a little bit too either or to say, hey, you know, you're here and we're over here and, you know, let's spend more time over here. That's too simplistic a way of looking at things also. So I want to at least, you know, suggest that there's a coevolutionary theme, there's a push and a pull, that both of us want to push, both of us want to pull. If you were looking at 2 extremes, there's actually 7 or 8, you know, at least. And that we each need to grow. Over.
The only reflexive thing that comes up for me at the end of that is or not. And the reason I add that is because, you know, Anna found herself in the first barn raising, and she was sort of like, what is this about? And she was sort of like, no, not for me. And so I don't carry into this the idea or construct that anybody has to do anything, including grow in the way that you're framing growth, right? You know, that's not sort of like a demand or requirement or you know, thing that at least aspirationally in my mind, it's like everybody comes as they are. They bring what they bring. They show up how they show up. And in honoring, accepting, respecting, embracing that, how do we do this? When some of those differences are like absolutely the formula for, you know, are the catalytic ingredients for hugely explosive things. And, you know, sometimes it'll sort itself out so the 2 agents don't come in contact, but sometimes they will. And when they do, you know, how prepared and how can we handle the consequences when it happens?
It could be just me, but I do feel that implicit in the unblocking topic is this is us, this is what we want to be as us. And so there's this implied gap. And if we want to be something that is not us today, there's a transition, whether it's logical, emotional, physical, intellectual, whatever it is, okay? There's an implied going from blocked to unblocked. So if you want to say, you know, hey, let's just accept who we are, then I really want to refine my understanding of what these meetings are about. Because even in the whole premise of a global governance model, it's that we don't have this global governance model. We want to find a way towards that global governance model. So there is a movement along some set of dimensions: intellectual, physical, contractual, financial, you know, compassionate. You know, there's a movement that is implied here. So call it growth, call it learning, call it transition, call it evolution, whatever you want to call it. But let's not negate it, because if we don't acknowledge it, then I will ask Carrie's question: what are we doing here? If I'm here just to accept all of us as human beings, as we are in our full grandeur at whatever stage of emotional or intellectual or physical or whatever growth we are, I could do that, and I would not ask these same questions. I would be a very different person if I wasn't thinking about the global governance model, or about the community of impact, or about the CMM, or about the proposal itself. I would be a very different person. But inherent in the reason why we are here is to see some movement towards something. I mean, the emergence of this word urgency already implies that. So I want to at least re-examine this question of, are we just here being humans, and me just expressing my humanity and letting everyone express their humanity? Or are we trying together to be, and then eventually do, and eventually manifest and realize something that we are not today? I think I've asked it already. Over.
Yeah, I just want to say that just seems to me like you just asked one of the real deepest existential questions. It's a big question. I have to think about what the answer is. but I've seen this come up in many contexts, and it's something that I struggle with personally too. This, because there's something that wants to change, and there's also something that wants to totally unconditionally embrace what is. And then what is also changing, always. So is there a way to sort of combine them? So I'm looking for a way to have both. That's what sort of feels. It feels like I want to come to a place where there is total acceptance and there is this burning evolutionary movement. But maybe it's easier said than done.
You wanted to say something, Tammy?
I do, but I thought you did. So if you want to complete, oh, you just muted. You want to? What?
Ladies first.
Well, this is just such an amazing nexus of consideration. And as some of you were speaking, I was thinking about, we are coming from where we've come from, and we bring in these assumptions or ideas or we trail in with what we know or have experienced, and also with some Trojan horse pieces of what has been, knowing that there's a new way of being that we're creating space for. So as these tensions arise, we're able to see those pieces that haven't been seen fully yet, or and that experience of kind of putting it together and having, the signals say, hey, there's this signal over here that's important. What about the full human experience? And then what about these maps that are able to bring this coherence into a short form that can be more clearly and easily understood, all as representations of our collective time and attention that is being kind of inserted into a co-evolutionary moment right now as we grok it, right? As we understand more clearly what lies between us. And this is that explosion that Sam is talking about, that is just under the surface, right? And there's the hourglass. So
Balance.
Sorry,
Right.
it's time standing still at the moment, Harry.
yes, and you know, and there's, you know, in this moment, there's 5 of us who have our time and attention focused together. What happens to our energetic pipe? How much are we able to understand? When we hear something that goes by that we don't agree with, do we make the choice to bring it up at that moment? Do we put that on pause while we deeply listen and see if there's something more to understand, to transform inside the self, to have that aha? Do we bring it forward and see if there's a potential moment collectively? These are the facilities, right? And there's more here. And then when people come and watch this and have their own insights, maybe they're able to write a map that then gives other people an entry point into these deep considerations that they are considering all on their own anyway, because we are in this explosive noosphere ecosystem of consciousness where we know it's time to wake up and put pieces together and, you know, co-learn and, you know that we don't have it all figured out. For me, some of the pieces that really help to serve that is listening to understand rather than listening to be right. Finding ways to have the courage to say the pieces that are missing, those gaps, which are often difficult. Anna spoke to that. You know, for her, she doesn't want to denigrate people's work as being offered, but it dropped off for her, her ability to connect, her attention. And it's uncomfortable to say that, and it takes courage, and it's a part of what's not seen, right? And is a point of healing, right? There's some, and I don't think it's personal at all. I think it's a transpersonal gap that is being pointed to, that if we love each other enough, if we appreciate each other enough, just for the fundamental state of being and having the courage to say that thing, then we can know more together. And with that, I'll pass to someone else.
Okay. I love it, Demi. Thanks so much. I love it. And about the doing and being, that's a kind of dance between those two all the time, because how can I do if I'm not being, and how can I be if I'm not doing? And in terms of evolution, the evolution we're trying to help forward is that I use the model put forward by Dave Gray, by what's his name, Claire Graves, like 50 years ago, and that's the fundament under the spiral dynamics. And they say, as Ken Wilber says, we're moving to a second tier consciousness now. And that's moving in that model from green, the networking, the being together, that's what we are practicing here, into the doing. But it's also moving from, once I'm in this we space and there's enough of a network to rest on and to belong to, as is mentioned today as well. I need to belong, and not just to belong to my own tribe here. I need to belong to worldwide humanity. So I must trust you strangers as well, and have a deep and intimate connection with you, and be able to rely on it. Say, okay, it's just okay. I can be totally acknowledged and be myself, and I can see you, you can see me. So that's great. So we're now in the we space. Okay, I can just be a being and enjoy that and be there for the rest of my life. But yeah, that's just not enough, as we know, because there's growth not just, that's not the hobby, that's demanded by the evolution from us. We either evolve or we die. So in order to not go extinct, we need to go to the second tier. And that's a huge jump. That's a leap ahead, because in order to go from green to teal or yellow, as it's named, I need to first get my shit together, get my own heart space and head space and all my doing and all my past traumas get kind of fixed. Otherwise, I just can't function in that realm or all domain. What's the place? Okay, so that's what I'm working on. And I think you guys are doing that too. And thank God, many, many more. But the difference between the let's call it yellow and green for the moment, between the green domain, where we all are so nicely being together and enjoying that, and going to yellow, is that I stop waiting for anybody else to move forward. I just go and act and take my own responsibility, and I do my thing. And I don't even ask permission or anybody, or I have agreements or rules or structures or procedures. I just go ahead because what I, from a very deep space, know that is needed, and I can only do my thing in the here and now here, because you're all out there, hopefully making same steps forward. But there's no we in the yellow. It's just me. And I have just, I am doing what I always did, just but more as an integral person and more from my own personal responsibility. And there's just one huge difference with all the people working in the for-profit companies and all the company stuff, is that I have a certain conviction that I do it for the whole and will never harm anybody else in going forward. And with that, I am complete for the moment.
I really like that, Harry. Glad you mentioned it. But when you say this about not asking for permission, just moving forward, if we do that from a collected space and in a conversation where we have really listened and been interested, and then it seems that the we space is still there, but you come to a new level in it if you can also just go and just follow your gut and try something, and if it whatever happens, it's learning. So the worst thing that happens is we learn. Yeah, I really like that.
Okay, I want to learn about this we space, because I have the my space that I don't think anyone else has access to because it's in my mind, right? And if I decide to write it down, you get glimpses of it. But I also have a notion of what this we space is, but that's also in my mind. Tammy has a notion of what's in Tammy's mind, but she has a notion of what the we space is as well. But I don't see it because it's in Tammy's mind. So what I'm saying is each of the 5 of us or 6 of us, whatever the number is, each has our own I space, and we each have our own version of what the we space is. And I don't think any of us is yet ready to say that my we space is the same as Doug's we space, because we haven't confirmed that. We haven't even really talked about that very much. So this notion that there's this one we space, I think right now, is not a well-formed notion. There's glimpses of it. There's implications, but it's not a well-formed notion. And much of my motivation is to try and see if we can get to a common we space, which means how do we share some of that? If we want that, it may be fine that we have n different we spaces where n is somewhere approximately the number of people that are participating, maybe greater than. I may have multiple notions of what this we space is, okay? So I want to throw that out there as a possible topic for some conversation in the future. And I want to also go back to one more theme, and with this I'll probably close for today, okay? And that is that, Doug, I am, as you are, still trying to understand what being human is or means. I think if we believe in science, if we believe in evolution, there's evolution of all the attributes that we now think of as being human. We don't have fins, we have toes and fingers. We still have entrails, but they look different from other species, so we've gone through much evolution. And if I think about what some of the greatest thinkers in our past have said, what makes us human is this thing up here. There are many other mammals that have heart. There are many other mammals that have guts. There's many other mammals that have vocal cords. And I don't necessarily need to pound it, but I'm not saying it's true, but I'm just saying there's one prevailing notion that says what makes us human is our ability to do something with this thing up here. Okay, and some of it have more of it, some of it has less of it, and I'm still trying to figure out how much of mine is non-operational after multiple concussions and that sort of thing. But so that to me says, rather than looking just to my heart, I have to look all throughout my body and then really understand this piece, which is what many people have said is what makes us human. It's not to ignore the heart, but it's to bring the brain and the mental functions into alignment with everything else that makes us mammal. So I want to say we have not yet really focused on what being human means in a we space notion. We've all kind of been making statements around it as though we understand. But I want to at least pose this question as saying, do we look really here, okay, to be human? Or do we look here, okay, this whole thoracic cavity, including, all the different chakras? I'm suggesting that we can do that. And that, to me, is more in alignment with what other term I've seen posed here, which is how to be whole. Not to be light, not to be dark, not to be mental, not just to be heart, but to be whole. And I want to bring that notion to what it means to be human. Over.
I know I am human, but I could never explain what exactly that is. But I just assume, and that's my working hypothesis, that I'm human. And with that imperfect notion, I can still learn more parts of it, but I don't have it currently a need to focus on exactly what that is. Over.
Yeah, each of us may, not need to or need to, but I think that has been a recurring theme here in our conversations, and that's why I associate and link my offering to that. Over.
I just want to say I also have that impression. It's been a recurring theme, and it's interesting that the group is called Global Challenges Collaboration. So there's this word global, and I mean that can really only be approached through a holistic way of thinking. So that if I'm serious about wanting to contribute something globally, which is useful, then it's probably a minimum requirement that I can have a relatively global consciousness in myself. They seem to go the same direction. A more complete consciousness, what it means to be a human. Those seem to go very closely together. And I've also noticed that humans who are very interested in global questions tend to also be very interested in being more whole and sort of integrate different parts of themselves in a larger harmony. And also systems thinking, which is maybe the sort of more formal or intellectual way of approaching it. But yeah, see a lot of overlaps there.
Yeah, I think I'm probably more resonant with Harry's share in terms of I sort of know it's there when I feel it when I feel it, and it's less of a headspace in terms of understanding it. So the piece of the puzzle, the piece of the puzzle is actually, for me, is less on the human than on the being piece. It's the part south. It's the part south of this thing on our shoulders that thinks, and our experience. When I reference and qualify things in terms of the experience as human beings, it's sort of through an experiential lens or frame. I look at the experience piece as the fully integrated load, good, bad, or indifferent. But in our experience, instant to instant, moment to moment, all of us are in there. And it's a knowing, and it's a sensing, and it's an emotional, and it's a spiritual thing. All of those dimensions are present and accounted for, or not, depending upon each individual, right? So I look at the human being experiential frame as sort of the ultimate complex system. And, each one of us is this walking around massively interconnected sensing, thinking, feeling being on a lot of levels, and then we bump into each other and try to do shit together. And it's like, holy cow, is that tough? And how do we do that better? Like, just how do we do that better? And the sort of balancing out and really enabling all of the pieces of that to be present and accounted for as an awareness and consciousness thing. It's not an either or in that, to me, in terms of being more heart-centered or more head-centered. It's all of it. But having all of it sort of in eye, in mind, in ear, and coming from that place. Rama actually sort of like, in one of the threads mentioned this sort of three-stepper. And I was like, I think, and mind you, I don't know, because it like gets really intangible and incomprehensible. It's not a knowable thing, but I think it's about all three of those things at once in the moment. And seeing whether we could bring to awareness that. That's really, that would be really doing us different. and I'm complete.
Yeah, there's something that I'm feeling into here around it was right there and then it slipped away. It really did. It went.
It'll come back.
Right. Thank you. For me, what I'm feeling and experiencing is as a constellation of consciousness. So it's not just my mind, it's not just my heart, it's not just my being in this body, it's this It's this constellation of factors that is consciousness that I know and feel is connected to each one of your consciousnesses as well. So there's this bleed over, there's this co-experience. And then it's making it audible and visible and understanding. Where's the barrier between me and you guys? I don't know. I honestly don't know where I stop and the world begins, because there's a part of me that feels that I have the capacity to enjoin my consciousness to other people, but also to the tree, to, you know, when I walk out in the world and I see a bird fly a certain way, it lands in my consciousness as a signal that is telling me something about the world that I'm in. And a lot of times that subtle signal gives me information that is present there. What does it mean? I don't know, but I feel it means something, and my consciousness is enjoined with it, telling me something. So as a being of consciousness, you know, how do we outpicture our collectiveness and subordinate perhaps to that intelligence, so that we can have a full experience of potential wisdom where we are doing, acting, making decisions together in a process of enlivening, awakening, and connecting our consciousness, you know? So there's that whole piece. And the other thing I'm really excited about is my experiences with WeTV, reviewing ourselves, watching these pieces, and having that experience of there's a time bend. There's also what people can hold and house as they're sharing in the moment, how it lands on each other. So these feel like these ways to be able to dissect, break down, study, look at how we are doing our being in a state of doing, because this is a state of doing. We're doing something here. And it may be that some of what we want to do is needing some of these baseline pieces to hold it so that it can have it legs. And we're building our inner capacities. It's all a part of the process. But I feel like that experience of WeTV is really giving me a lot. And it's really powerful, not only what it is and what I'm learning from our co-relationships, but also for seeing when I'm really in it, when I'm and really sharing from what I allowing that channel to be clean and clear. And then the places where I'm like, oh shit, I fell off. I got triggered by something someone said, or I didn't hear what someone said, because when I listened back to it, actually, they didn't say that. I just heard one word and went, whoa, I was over there. So anyway, I just wanted to put some of those pieces in, and I know we're getting to the end of our time, but I love this so much, and I love you all so much. And, you know, this entire group of people that have come together, I just feel like there's so much here. And I'm really grateful for the experience and for being here.
Thanks, Tammy.
Yeah, thanks. Totally.
Yes, there's a concept I call total intelligence, and I don't even know what I mean with that, but there's something to do with this happening, everything at once and all, and so. And I am going to add one piece that I also add, that I can trust that even if I do not pay attention or go to eat because I'm hungry now, that's okay too. So I'm about to drop off here.
I think we're ready to wrap. If anybody has a last contribution, share, whatever. I just like to thank everybody. This is what I'm here for. And we're getting into the tall grass, and it's terrific.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
How to represent this for the others. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Bye-bye.